Today we're recording the interview of Keith Brinnon. It is July 15th, 2016 at 9:50 a.m. We are in Vandalia, Ohio. So Keith, when and where were you born?
I was born in August 19th, 1949 in Springfield, Ohio, which is just right up the road here.
Okay. Who are your parents and what were their occupations?
My parents was Lauren and Dorothy Brinnon. My dad worked 37 years as a lineman and then head foreman for Ohio Edison in Clark County. My mother was a housewife.
Okay. Did you have any siblings?
I had two brothers. My older brother was, when he was 18, he was killed by a drunk driver. And then my younger brother lived about 2 weeks after birth. So I'm the sole surviving son, so lost two siblings.
Okay. What were you doing before you entered the service?
Going to school, because right after I got out of high school, I went into the service. I worked that summer delivering stuff to gas stations, you know, like cigarettes and candy, you know, just supply. There was an I-Supply place up in Springfield, so I done that, and then in September, as soon as I was 18, because my parents wouldn't sign for me, as soon as I was 18, I went in the service, enlisted.
Okay. What branch of the military did you serve in?
I was in the Army.
In the Army?
And when the reason I enlisted, I was kind of like we talked previously. I had this idea. I said, well, I'll go in the Army, I'll enlist. It was 1967, and I said, you know, all eligible males are going to go in the service regardless. But I enlisted with the notion, said I'll never have to go to Vietnam because I was sole surviving son. Well, the Army didn't quite see it that way. So I went through basic training and my schooling and then right straight over to Vietnam.
Needs of the Army trump everything.
Yeah.
Okay, so you enlisted then. And did you say why you chose the Army over other branches?
I think it was just in the family. My grandfather was in World War I, my dad was in World War II, they were both in the Army. Of course, it was called Army Air Corps then, but so it just kind of like passed down through generations. So now I got a son, he's in the Army Reserve, so.
Okay, where's your son stationed out of?
He's in reserves. He goes down here in Mainsville, Ohio.
Okay. In
a unit down there in the reserve unit.
Okay. I'm still in the reserves actually, so that's why I asked.
Oh, are you?
Yeah, I'm down. My unit's down Fort Thomas, Kentucky. But
yeah, he's down there in Mainsville, which is the water purification unit.
Oh, okay.
He's been in 4 years now.
Oh, okay, gotcha. So, what happened when you left for basic training? Do you remember what that was like, leaving?
Yeah, it was. I was real nervous. It was kind of hard because, you know, parents, we said goodbye, and I was kind of, you know, excited but yet kind of scared. I was only, you know, just turned 18 August 19th, September 10th. I was off going to Fort Jackson, South Carolina for basic training. Nervous. All I know, it was a real long, you know, they flew us, and then by the time they bust us, we got to Fort Jackson about 3 in the morning. Was tired, and you get off the bus and you got this guy in this Smokey the Bear hat hollering at you, and you don't know what to do, and they're hollering instructions and everything. So it was quite an experience. There was many times I asked myself, I said, what did I get myself into, you know?
Absolutely. I know what you mean. So what was it like, you know, the first few days of training? You know, going through that. I mean, obviously you're probably thinking every day, why did I do this? Why did I do this?
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, I often question myself, why did I do this? You know, it was about 3 to 4 days. They got you in a retaining center until they determine where you're really going to go, what your unit's going to be in basic training. So after I got out of there, I got assigned to the unit. Of course, nervous, and I can tell you a little story. We was at our primary training unit. It was only the second day. Of course, in South Carolina, September is still hot, and we were all standing in formation and at attention, and this drill sergeant was coming up, and I'll never forget it. And thank goodness he stopped at the guy right next to me, because he looked at him and said, "Soldier, what's that on your face?" And I don't know why, but as soon as the guy said sweat, I looked down at the drill sergeant's name tag, and it was sweat. And this drill sergeant absolutely went crazy. So I learned from that day on, I had perspiration on my face. It was not sweat.
That's funny. So do you recall any of your other instructors besides Drill Sergeant Sweat?
Just Sweat, and then there was another one, Robinson, and he just got back from Vietnam, and you could tell he was a little bit different than the rest of them. I mean, he was more hardcore. He was, very quick-tempered. I mean, to look back on it nowadays and know what we know now, he probably had some PTSD, and he was just a little bit different than the rest of the drill sergeant. There was no compassion or mercy there at all from him. Mm-hmm. Some of the other ones, every once in a while, they'd give you a break. And then the only other one that really stood out to me was Sergeant Edwards. He was the head NCO, and I'll never forget, we was in physical training, and he was having us do push-ups, and he says, okay, we're going to do push-ups on one arm now, and we're going to hold it. And he was up there in the prone position doing push-ups with one arm, and outlasted all of us young kids. We were falling down, couldn't maintain it, but yeah, he was another one I remembered.
Okay. How did you adapt to that? The food, the lifestyle, the physical regiment, barracks?
I guess I kept saying back in my mind, that they had to do this. They had to break you down so you could think the way they think. Mm-hmm. And really, it was for your own good. And, it's not one of them situations where I could walk into the commander's office and say, hey, you know what, this job just ain't working out for me. So I knew I was there. And so if I was there, I might as well make the best of it and do everything I could possibly do. Okay. And knowing it was for your own good. Yeah. Even though it may not seem it at the time, it was for your own good.
It's a good attitude to have in basic. So you did the basic training. Was your basic training and infantry training all in one?
Well, we had some infantry training, but you went through marksmanship, learn how to disassemble rifles, learn how to, crawl underneath the concertina wire, and you did that, bivouac, 099. So you had some infantry training in basic training. Okay. But the advanced infantry training, you had to go to school for that.
Okay, so what did you go? I'm sorry, for some reason I thought you were infantry.
No, I actually went to down at Fort Rucker. I went to crew chief school. But they didn't tell me that part of the crew chief school, if you went to Vietnam, was door gunner. Mm. So I became a 67 November 20, which is a crew chief for a single turbine rotor aircraft.
Okay. So you went to, how long was that training?
That was 8 weeks.
Okay, and then from there, where do you go?
Right straight to Vietnam.
And what year was this?
1968 when I got home in Vietnam.
Okay.
I went through basic training in 67.
Okay, so you get over there in Vietnam. So you served in Vietnam. Can you give me some maybe memorable experiences from Vietnam? Good, bad, either way.
Memorable experiences. I guess when I first went over, the most memorable one is being with all the other guys. And on that plane we had some guys were going back for the second tour. Mm-hmm. And so we were what considered newbies. Sure. Of course they were harassing us and stuff like that, which made us more nervous, really not knowing what we was expected, what we was going to get into. Mm-hmm. And when they opened, we landed at night, and when they opened the door, just the first initial smell of that country, I mean, that's something that has stuck with me for years. Even today, if there's a similar smell somewhere, man, it just, you think of the country right now. That was one thing. Another thing.
Could you describe the smell?
I guess it would kind of be like being around a dump, with the moist, and you had a lot of vegetables were on the ground, a lot of produce and stuff. And of course, the bathroom facilities over there weren't the best. A lot of, the Vietnamese would just go right out in the ditch. So that after years, that all built up, and you just smell it. Just the moist, humid, from the rice paddies and the jungles.
Okay. And you were saying something else. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. You were mentioning another memory. or experience after you were talking about the smell? What was the other
Yeah,
one?
then after the smell, and then again, it was like we was thrown back into the first days of boot camp. People hollering, telling you where to go, you know, and it's all new, and you're scared anyway, and you hear the, in the background, you hear the bombs dropping, and you know, you see the fire, and so it was nerve-wracking, to say the least. But yet, there was some comfort in the fact knowing that you wasn't the only one going through this.
Sure.
You had a couple hundred guys with you that was going through the same thing. And so, you know, you just, that's what, to me, that's when the bonding really started. Because you're going through it together. You know, you're in the trenches together. You're in the, you know, being scared, and you know, you're in not knowing and not sure. So that's what, you know, that's when it all started. And then when I finally got my assignment, and the first, you know, of course, you still got a lot of that basic training in you. You know, everything has to be proper and stuff. And when you're over there in Vietnam, when you're over there in they call it, quote, a police action, but for me it was a war zone. But I never forget, I finally got to the 121st Assault Helicopter Company. That's where I was assigned to. And of course, when they assigned me to that, a guy looked at me and said, I don't know where he's just smarting off, but he looked at me and he says, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm going to be a crew chief door gunner. He said, well, you got a life expectancy of 3 days, and after that you're living on borrowed time. Which, that little comment didn't help anything.
Right off the bat, yeah.
But when I got to my unit, again, I don't know why it was always night, but I got to my unit at night, and when I stepped out of the helicopter, I stepped in a mud hole. And of course, my boots had mud on them and stuff, and they said, well, we're going to go right straight. First sergeant wants to meet all of you newies. I said, I can't go, my boots are dirty. They go, oh, don't worry about that, your boots are pretty clean. So just getting that mindset change of what they drilled in you as far as the proper etiquette in boot camp versus to what real life is in a war zone, it's totally different.
Sure.
So that was an experience that really stuck out.
Yeah. Okay. So what were your, what were your typical duties then? You said you were a door gunner. Go through an average day for you then. Average
day for me was it could start at any time, because in the gun platoon I was assigned to, which was within the 121st Assault Helicopter Company, you had the slicks which carried the troops, and then you had the gunships which had the rockets and miniguns, and we were always on alert 24 hours a day. If we ever had a mortar attack, we had to get up, crank the ships up, get up in the air, find out where Charlie was firing the mortars from, and take them out. But a typical day, you get up early in the morning, you go to the debrief room. They usually tell you, okay, this is where we're going today. This is going to be a hot LZ. This is going to be, a friendly territory, just a routine mission. We'd go out and make sure the aircraft was ready. We was fully armed. All the weaponry was ready to go, and so was the helicopter, because we always had a door gunner with me. Basically, the way it worked, I was the crew chief. I made sure the helicopter was fully functional. The gunner would make sure that the gun system was fully functional. But over time, you started intertwining responsibilities. A lot of times I'd look at the gun system, he looked at the helicopter, but both of us was responsible. Then you had your pilot and co-pilot. The pilot was usually assigned to your aircraft. The co-pilot was on a rotating basis. You have a new co-pilot every day. They rotate around, about every 5 days, 7 days, you'd have the same co-pilot, but that's the way it worked. But typical day, we get up, go to the debrief room, get something to eat, and then we'd be ready and we'd take off and go wherever we had to go for that operation that day. A lot of times we'd work all day, come back at night, then you'd have to service the guns, and you'd have to service the aircraft, make sure it was ready for the next day, or possibly you had to fly that night if there was a mortar attack. And so that basically was a day.
So when you're in the, when you're sitting at your post, I guess, on the aircraft, what are you looking for?
Well, what we would do, they would take the gunships and they would send us in first to an area where they was going to insert the troops, and we'd go in there and fly at low level, like almost treetop level, and see if we could draw a fire. If we drew a lot of fire, we say, okay, this is a hot LZ, recommend you come in on a heading of 285. And then when the slicks would start coming in, they were lined up and they would start flying in. Well, we'd fly teardrop shapes around them, so if they ever started receiving fire, we could take them out right now, so the slicks wouldn't get shot up.
Yeah.
So that's what we would do. Then when we went to extract the troops out, we'd done the same thing. We'd go in there and tell them, you know, come in on this heading, get in and get out.
Okay. So while you were over there, you know, doing your job, did you ever experience any combat?
Yeah.
Could you give maybe some experience from that? Or?
I guess the biggest one was when I actually was caught a secondary explosion, caught shrapnel on my side and my neck. We was down Baccaloo. I called receiving fire, and you always pop smoke. And you fly in fire teams, lead ship and wing ship. And if you had a heavy fire team, you had a lead ship, wing ship on the deck, and then you had the Huey Hog, which had a different set of weaponry on it, about 500 feet up in the air. I called receiving fire, pop smoke. We come back around, and Warrant Officer Dandridge cut loose with the miniguns. And when he did, all of a sudden, secondary explosion, this shrapnel would just come up through the ship and everything. I caught a piece in the neck and in the side. There's a lot of other ones when I know one time we had to go. In fact, it was on, I think it was Apocalypse Now, or one of them. But I was actually on that mission where we went into that POW camp.
Oh.
And there was nobody there. Evidently, they got to work. I guess the most exciting one was we went down all the way to the southern tip of Vietnam, light fire team, and we landed on LTD boats. They were right offshore, and it was down to Humane Forest, and that's where in the 50s where that company of French went in and never came back out.
Right, yeah.
And so we had seals. We were inserting seals off our gunships. We couldn't carry too many because we were so loaded with armament. So we had about 3 to 4 seals on each gunship, and we, you know, inserted them into the Humane Forest. And of course we called receiving fire, and we got some fire, but we dropped them off, and about 8 hours later we went to pick them up, and man, you got to give it to them guys.
Yeah.
They were something else. But on the way out, my ship got shot into the hydraulics. And so Captain Taylor was flying it back. And so here you got this boat that's bouncing up and down in the sea, right? With a big deck. And you got this helicopter that's going to try to land on it. All of a sudden Captain Taylor went, man, this hydraulic's getting stiff. And I seen where it was blowing hydraulic fluid. I said, well, we're losing our hydraulics. He said, well, he said, I want to tell you something right now. He says, if we can't get it on the ship, he looked at the co-pilot, I forget who it was. He said, I'm going to roll it your way into the ocean. Just so, you know, with some kind of, you know, maneuver that we could possibly get out of it. And so I looked up and I seen the clear blue sky on the top of the deck, and I looked down and was doing something, and looked back up and seen the gray side of the ship, and I said, oh, here we go. But he finally got her up and set her down, flattened it out, and spread the skids out. But
so you didn't have to roll it?
Didn't have to roll it.
Oh, man. I can't imagine. All right. Did you get a Purple Heart for your...
Yes.
You did? Okay.
Purple Heart, then I got a air medal with the V device.
Oh, okay, with Valor.
For heroism.
Okay.
That's when we was down at Rockjaw. And we were doing that, and we ran into a North Vietnamese kind of like platoon of specialized in rifle. They were marksmen. And we started receiving heavy fire, and we made a gun run, was going in, and a bullet came through the chin bubble and went right into Captain Taylor, or no, it was Captain Ferguson that time, excuse me, Captain Ferguson, and he received it, and the aircraft just jumped up, and we got more bullet holes put in us, so we had to yank him out. We dropped all the armament, and I assisted in the flight following, forwarding, to get him to the hospital as fast as we could. So
do you receive like any kind of, you know, I don't, oh shit training for like when something like that happens and you have to, oh shit, I gotta take the controls?
It's surprisingly enough, it's almost like spontaneous instinct reaction. I knew he was hurt, I knew he was shot, and he was kind of like frozen on the controls, and it was Dandridge again. He had to knock his hands off the controls, and I had to pull him back, get him away from the controls, and at that time we had to eject the armament because we was low on fuel and didn't even know if we had enough to get to Canto to get him to the hospital.
So is he all right?
Yeah, he made it. He's still living today. I talk to him every once in a while.
Okay. All right. So, you know, seeing that happen to maybe your friend, right? Captain Ferguson, you said?
Yes.
I'm assuming you guys were somewhat of friends since you guys
yeah,
worked together.
It's funny how in a gun platoon, when it's a little bit different than the slicks. In the gun platoon, your life depends on what that other guy's doing. And so that kind of, the barrier's there, but that kind of like, I'm an officer and you're an NCO, it kind of fades away a little bit.
Sure.
So you get it really a little bit closer.
Okay.
It's like I would always call him Captain Ferguson, but he told him his first name was Wayne. He said he could always call me Bill. He said, don't worry about roll up in the air. So
yeah. Well, you know, going through that and seeing what, you know, him get hurt, you know, what was going through your mind, or what was that like?
You know, I think the one thing, not just that, but the overall experience, I think I seen just how cool men can be to other men. I mean, that really stood out to me, how, you know, life meant nothing over there. I mean, basically, when you got over there, you got in a mindset, either it's going to be him or it's going to be me.
Sure.
And whatever it takes to keep me alive, I'm going to do that.
Absolutely.
And that's the biggest thing that really changed me over there, was seeing that. I mean, I've seen a lot of guys, you know, wounded, killed, you know, legs blown off, whatever. But just seeing how cool men could be to men, it was just, it always stuck with me.
Sure. Okay. You know, you talked a little bit about the friendship and camaraderie in the ship, which is nice. You covered that one. But you know, what about staying in touch with family when you're over there?
Well, I wasn't the best letter writer. In fact, I got called into the old man's office. Major called me in, and he was not a happy camper because he had a letter from the Red Cross and said Mrs. Brinnon, which was my mom, was very concerned about her son because she hadn't heard from him for quite a while. And so he said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do, Keith. He said, here's a piece of paper, here's a pen, and you're going to sit right here and write your mother a letter. And then after that, you're going to write her at least once a week. I said, yes, sir. So I wrote a letter. So I don't know, I guess you get so wound up about keeping yourself alive that you kind of don't think about, and then you're tired and you fly, and then you get tired, and I know that's not a good excuse, but I just didn't write that much. A lot of guys wrote. I mean, I think they were more diligent in writing their girlfriends or wives than they were their parents. I was saying when I was engaged, but when I went over there, but after about 6 months, I get a nice Dear John letter. Well, in fact, it wasn't from her, it was from the next door neighbor. It cut out a clipping of the wedding announcement of my best friend I graduated from high school with, my fiance. So
oh, wow. That's rough news to get.
that really kind of made it worse. I went into high gear then of hating everything.
Yeah.
And so.
Wow. Man. Sorry, I'm taking that in. Jesus. So you didn't use Mars radio or anything, the recordings or anything like that either? Just letters?
No, I imagine the officers had Mars radio. They called home and stuff, but the only time I really called home is when I went on R&R to Taipei. And then I was able to call home, and of course they had it all set up where my cousins, the whole family was there in my parents' house, and I called and everybody got on the phone back and forth. So.
Okay. So what did you do, you know, I know you said you didn't have too much free time, but when you had a little bit of free time, what did you do for recreation?
Well, usually went downtown and went to all the bars and you know, about it.
Okay. So, drinking. See, that's amazing to me that, you know, because when I was in Afghanistan, it was like, you have alcohol, you're getting Article 15.
Yeah.
You know, Vietnam's a little bit different in that respect.
Vietnam, I mean, it was, you know, drink all you want.
Yeah.
Because we had an NCO club on compound. We either go to there or we go downtown and then get in trouble downtown.
Yeah. All right. So, how did you return home?
On TWA flight.
Okay. Came
home and landed at Fort Ord, and of course they had to make sure you had all your stuff, and then it was really an experience when we got to San Francisco Airport.
Why is that?
I mean, just to see the way the people treated us. You know, one guy got spit on, we got booed, I mean, I think their anger with the government was taken out on us because we were the easy targets. And some guys lost their temper and some guys tried to maintain. I mean, when I went over there, it wasn't for people. I went over there to fight for freedom because I believed in freedom. And I believed in the United States. It wasn't no great patriot thing. And so I didn't fight for this particular person's stuff. I fought for their right to have freedom. And to see that reaction, you know, it just kind of turns your world a different way.
Sure.
Which just, it just increased the hatred in me more. Not only now did I hate the war because of seeing what men could do to other men, but I hated the people in the United States because of the way they were acting. So I was one great big ball of hate. And it showed later on as soon as I got out of service. But.
Yeah. Okay. So how were you received besides, you know, obviously not a good reception there when you get to San Francisco, but what about when you get home?
Home was a little bit better because they were your friends. They kind of understood, you know, when you went in, how you was thinking, they, you know, with you when you was growing up, so they kind of know your character. So it was a little bit better, but still every once in a while, you know, if I went out, you know, you go to a nightclub or something and somebody would have to mention, oh yeah, he just returned from Vietnam or whatever. You get a smart comment, baby killers, you know, you just enjoy that kind of stuff, don't you? And you get that every once in a while. Not as bad as what we went through at San Francisco Airport.
Okay. So how did you, you know, I know you said, you mentioned it, you touched on it, but how did you readjust to civilian life then?
I didn't.
Okay.
I became a drug addict and an alcoholic to hide and kill the pain. And I didn't, for a while, I didn't want to deal with it. My biggest mistake, I guess, was I figured when I come back, people owed me something. And then I realized they don't owe me squat. I thought that way for a long time, but then I said, no, they, you know, I fought not directly for them, but, you know, I fought for they could have the freedom. And I think the biggest heartburn I ever had was when, remember in Iran, when they had the hostages, and then they got the hostages released, and they made such a big deal of the hostages, and then all of a sudden it was like they went, oops, you know, we really didn't treat the Vietnam veterans pretty good. Let's have a Vietnam Veterans Day. And I'll never forget it, I was working up at Yo Superior in Springfield, tool and die maker, and the CEO called all the Vietnam vets that were working there at the time into his office and said, you know, they're doing this across the United States and they want to have an appreciation for Vietnam veterans, and we'd like to put your name, you know, up on the bulletin board and say how proud we are of your service and everything. I'll never forget, I looked at him and I said, don't you dare, don't put my name up there. I said, I am not going to be thrown a pacifier for what the United States done and think they can make it up by, oh, let's have a Vietnam Veterans Day. I still had hatred in me then, still had a lot of hatred.
So, and I forgot to touch on this. How long after you got back from Vietnam did you get out of the military?
I got back, well, they sent me back because they operated once on my neck in Vietnam, and they brought me back and operated again down Fort Hunter. I came back in November of '69, and September of '70 I got out.
Okay. Okay, so not too much long after. All right, well, how did you, I mean, you know, obviously you're not a drug addict and an alcoholic now, at least on the outside. You're functioning well.
I'm not.
How did you make the recovery then?
The recovery was a very long, slow recovery. I guess I can only say that I asked Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, to come in my heart and heal stuff. And the biggest turning point, you know, I was getting better and the Lord made it a lot better, but the biggest turning point is when I started working for Dave Reaver and taking vets back to Vietnam. It's kind of like going back facing your fear. And I'll never forget, a lot of people would ask. I went back first in '99 and we took a bunch of vets back, and then when I came back, a lot of people said, well, what was the biggest thing that stood out to you? What was it, the smell of the country again? Was it seeing the people? Was it this, that? I said, no, not really. I said, the biggest thing that stood out to me was when we was going over there, and I seen 35 guys that really didn't even know one another, but they decided they wanted to go back. How that bond, that veteran bond was there. It was like we were all brothers again. It was just yesterday. I said, that's what really stood out to me. I said, that's when I started realizing, hey, you know, these other guys, you know, because I listened to their background, what they've done over the past 30 years or so. I said, they've turned their life around, and, you know, if they can do it, I can do it. And if I need help, I know I can rely on them to help me turn around. So it was a twofold process, you know, finding Jesus, number one, and number two was finding other vets again. That made the difference too.
Okay. I know you mentioned you talked to a couple of the guys, but so you've maintained some of the friendships with some of your fellow guys that you served overseas with?
Yeah, off and on. I just went down in May to Fayetteville to a guy that flew with me. We flew together. He was from Queens, New York, and I hadn't seen him in 40 years. Talked with him, but I haven't seen him, so we saw one another. And I don't have it on my phone, but we got a picture of him and I standing together when we was in Vietnam, when we was 18, 19 years old. And then a recent picture of this past year, I said, oh my God, look how 50 years can change people. A lot of hair loss, a lot of extra weight. Of course, I got skinnier, but yeah, we stay in touch.
Okay. Are you a member of any veterans organizations?
No, I don't belong to the VFW. I do belong to the DAV, Disabled American Vets. I try to volunteer work out here at the VA. Right now, with this effort going on, I am a charter member of the Veteran Farmer Coalition across the United States.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about what you got going on here then.
Here, you know, I brought it in as 5 acres, and what I'm really wanting to do is start a place where vets can come and work together and just, you know, experience life together. And I think through that process, you know, they'll start opening up, you know, just the small talk when you get vets working together, you know, doing this and that. Then they start joking around, and before you know it, the therapy starts, and they don't even realize the therapy's starting. Not only coming out here to work, but I want to, you know, create some small cottages where displaced vets could come and stay and live, you know, as long as they want, and have a place they call their own. I mean, even older vets, I think it's sad that even, you know, when vets get old and they get too old to be by themselves and they lose their house or they have to sell it, to put them in an institution, like, I guess, you know, here's your room, 5 doors down the hallway, and, you know, I mean, thank God they got a place to go. But if this has got the idea of, they have their own little place, a place that they can take pride in and take care of it and do what they want to do with it. And so that's what the whole thing of it is not only having a community where some vets can stay, but have a place where vets can come, bring their families, and just be together and have a common goal together and just help one another. And that's what it's all about. And we're going to do that through, as you see in the back here, produce. Now the produce will have the Homegrown by Heroes labels on it. Sell produce, help them make some money. We sell it to local restaurants. And they work towards that, and they can see a result, which I think would be good. And of course, it's been a proven fact too that just farming has helped so many vets. You can get online and see so many vets with PTSD. Just the fact that out here working in the soil, growing stuff, is very therapeutic for them.
Okay. So, what are some life lessons, I guess, that you learned from the military?
Life lessons I learned from the military is always be prepared. You can really, I guess, no matter how bad things get, there's always tomorrow. Every day's new. Just because of what happened yesterday don't mean the same thing's going to happen today. And there are people that you can trust, and there are people that stick close to you. I mean, not everybody's bad. and it's just a bond there that you can't explain unless you've been there. And there is good in this world, and I would just say, you know, keep on keeping on. I mean, that's the biggest thing. You just keep on keeping on. Never quit. Never quit.
Okay. So you talked about it a little bit, but how has the military service impacted your feeling about war in the military, just in general?
War is very cruel. You know, the old saying, all's fair in love and war, basically is true. Because in war, I mean, to look on it, really never resolves anything. I can't see where, you know, it resolves stuff. But yet, there is, I think, a necessity for defense of your country, yes. Do we always have to go to war? No, I don't think so. But there are times that appropriate action is necessary. Most recently here, that everybody could relate to is ISIS. I think appropriate military action is necessary, because you know you can't stop those things unless you take that kind of action. The war can be very cruel. Does it really solve everything? No. It solves some stuff temporarily. Does it solve it permanently? No, never has.
Okay. So this will be added to the Library of Congress archives. It'll be added to the Ohio link, which is like an Ohio archive for any public library or university in Ohio. Is there any message you want to leave for maybe future generations or anybody who might view the video?
I think the biggest thing is, number one, America still, regardless of what they say, is the best country in the world to live in. Yeah, it has its faults and stuff. And number two is just be true to yourself. Just be honest with yourself and never give up. Never give up. Never let your dreams go. Never let them go. I mean, I could have let mine go very easily and stayed a drunk and stayed a drug addict and probably been in the grave by now. But like I said, there's always tomorrow, and never let your dreams go.
Okay. Anything else that you thought we would cover that you wanted to cover, that you wanted to add?
Well, I think, you know, with the times that we went back to, took veterans back to Vietnam, I mean, that's a lesson in itself of how a lot of times we don't want to, a lot of times we're scared to, but if you stay in that place where you're always going to kind of like fear your fear, you're never going to get past it. To watch these vets who went back and it's kind of like they faced their fear. They was able to take that final piece that was always missing and put it together, and believe it or not, the healing process was tremendous. I mean, my outlook itself was so changed when I first went back, of how, you know, when I went over there as 18 years old, and the perception of I had of the people versus when I went back and really seen the true people and realized they were just doing what they were told to do, like we were told to do. But they, you know, they had families, they have loved ones, they had dreams, they had hopes, just like us. And so basically we're all the same. But just face your fears. I mean, that was a lesson that I learned so vividly, of watching guys totally get healed. There was a couple of prisoners of war soldiers that went back with us.
Yeah.
And the healing that took place because they faced the fear.
All right. Well, Keith, thank you for doing this interview with me, and thank you for your service.
Well, thank you for having me. You're welcome.